In 2004, a man named Damian Aspinall released a gorilla he had raised by hand back into the wild forests of Gabon. The gorilla's name was Kwibi. He'd grown up around people, and then he went fully wild. Joined a forest group, stopped trusting humans, did exactly what he was supposed to do. 5 years later, Damian went back to find him. By then, Kwibi was a full-grown silverback, over 400 pounds. Everyone warned him not to do it, that walking up to a wild silverback in his own territory is a good way to die. He called out into the trees anyway, and Kwibi came. He pressed his face against Damian's. He held him. He sat with him for hours, taking his hand now and then he walked back into the forest. 5 years, no contact, and he came. It's the kind of moment that makes you want to believe something simple, that the animal remembered, that it felt something close to love. But it raises a question that sounds easy until you sit with it. Do animals remember the specific humans who were kind to them? Or are they just reacting to a familiar smell, a familiar shape, a pattern that once meant safety? The answer is stranger than either one. Start with how memory even works in an animal, because most people picture it wrong. There are two kinds. There's the general kind. This smell means danger. This place means food. And then there's the other kind, the ability to replay one specific moment in one specific place with one specific individual. For a long time, scientists assumed that second kind belonged only to us. Reliving an exact memory seemed to need a sense of self we didn't think animals had. Then the evidence started coming in, and it kept saying otherwise. Take a small bird called the scrub jay. Researchers found it could remember not just that it had hidden food, but exactly what it hid, where it hid it, and how long ago. And it would go dig up the food that spoils fastest first before it went bad. That's a specific event, replayed in a brain the size of a grape. And then it climbs. In a study a few years ago, scientists used eye tracking to test whether great apes recognize old friends from photographs. They did, instantly. One bonobo named Louise picked out her sister and her nephew from pictures, even though she hadn't laid eyes on either of them in 26 years. 26 years. It's the longest social memory ever measured in any animal that isn't human. These animals don't just remember that other individuals exist. They hold on to specific faces for almost their entire lives. So the memory is there. The harder question is whether it reaches all the way out and holds on to us. Here's where the skeptic has a point, and it's a fair one. Maybe the animal isn't remembering a person at all. Maybe it's just been trained by life. This shape, this scent once meant food, so it comes closer. No memory of kindness, just a slot machine that paid out once. Except that explanation starts to fall apart the moment real danger enters the picture. In 2009, a beluga whale named Mila was performing in a deep tank in China during a freediving contest. One of the divers, a young woman named Yang Yun, had her legs cramp up in the freezing water, 20 feet down. She couldn't kick, she started to sink, and Mila dropped down beneath her, took her leg gently in her mouth, and pushed her all the way up to the surface. Not to the edge, straight up, to air. There was no trick involved, no food, no cue. There was a specific human in trouble, and an animal that chose to act. To understand why a memory like that sticks, look at what fear does to a brain. When an experience is soaked in terror, or in relief, it doesn't get filed away like an ordinary afternoon. The brain tags it, marks it as important, and tagged memories last. Neuroscientists have found this same machinery running in the big social mammals. Apes, elephants, dolphins, whales, the same wiring we use to burn in the most important moments of our own lives. So think about what that means for an animal that was starving or trapped or dying, and then felt that terror lifted by one particular person. It doesn't just learn humans are safe, it keeps the whole thing. The fear, the hands, the voice, the exact moment the nightmare stopped. The day you lifted that fear gets burned in deeper than almost anything else that ever happens to it. You see it in animals that had every reason to stay wild and chose a person anyway. There's a penguin in Brazil, a little Magellanic penguin found half dead and covered in oil, nursed back to health by a retired bricklayer. When he was strong, he was released back into the sea, and every year since, he has come back. He swims an enormous distance, past his own kind, past every other human on that coast, to spend months with the one man who saved him, and he won't let anyone else near him. Out of an entire ocean, he chose a person. And then there's the case that's hardest to shake. In a zoo in the Netherlands, there was a chimpanzee named Mama. For decades, she was the matriarch, the one the whole group answered to. And there was a biologist, Jan van Hoof, who had known her since the early 1970s, nearly his whole career, her whole life. When Mama was 59, she was dying. She'd curled into herself in the corner of her enclosure, stopped eating, stopped drinking, stopped responding to almost everyone. The keepers thought she was nearly gone. Then Van Hoof came to say goodbye. It took her a moment to register the face. And then it landed. This frail, dying animal broke into an enormous grin, started crying out, and reached up to touch his hair, stroking it, pulling him closer, wrapping an arm around him the way you'd hold someone you'd missed for years. After weeks of refusing food, she began eating again, from his hand. She died about a week later. She didn't have words. She had almost nothing left. And she spent some of the very last of it making sure the man who'd known her for 40 years knew she recognized him. That's the honest place this all lands. We can prove the memory systems are real. We can prove that big-brained social animals hold on to specific individuals across decades, that the moments soaked in feeling get marked and kept. What we can't reach is the inside of it, whether there's something in there that feels the way it feels in you. I remember what you did for me. There's no instrument that reaches that far. There may never be. But look at what these animals actually do. The gorilla had no reason to come out of the trees. The whale had nothing to gain by lifting a stranger to the surface. The penguin could have stayed in the sea. The dying chimp could have stayed in her corner. There was no food in it, no survival logic, nothing forcing the moment. And every one of them reached for a person anyway. Maybe that isn't proof of memory the way we'd like to define it, but a 400-pound silverback walked out of a forest, sat down beside the man who raised him, took his hand for a while, and then, when he was ready, walked back into the trees he now called home. He didn't have to. Nothing made him. He just remembered something, in whatever language his mind keeps it, and he came back to say it.